Hello there, if you've ever wanted to master long exposure photography, this is the video for you. Over the last 10 years, I've filmed hundreds of shoots and I want to share with you everything I've learned. In the rain, in the woods, seascapes, panoramic long exposure photography, sunrise and sunset long exposures, slow shutter speed photography, and the longest exposure I ever did. I promise you leave with new ideas, fresh inspiration, and everything you need to know to start creating your own. Before we get going, I just wanted to quickly let you know that I've just released a new landscape photography multi-day workshop or tour. It's going to be in the Lake District in the winter of 2026. I'd love it if you were to check it out on the link down below. Right, let's get out there. We're going to jump around in time a little bit, and if you stay right to the end, you'll see a bit of footage that I'm just a little bit embarrassed about. Right, so I'm set up for my first shot of the day, and undoubtedly the most important thing when we're doing long exposure photography to make sure you're getting the good shots is to develop your workflow. Now, workflow is important in all of landscape photography. It's the thing I see people struggling with most, and it's when people struggle with their workflow that they don't enjoy it. When I approach a scene like this one here, I will first have a look around, decide on the composition I want, just roughly, and then I will get the tripod out. I will then put the camera onto the tripod and then fine-tune my composition, essentially. Now, in this case, I'm going for a shot that will sort of try to illustrate a little bit the industrial feel of this coastal point where I am today. And this, I think it must be a water tower or something here, sticking out of the sea, is what I'm going to focus on. And it's a nice subject for a long exposure, that fixed point with the moving sea around it. And it's this gentle tide that's really lovely. Now, when you're doing long exposures, normally, and the best shots will come if the sun is not in the scene, either with it behind you or with it in thick cloud. At the moment, as you can see, it's just off to the left of this water tower. Slightly phallic water tower, but there we go. It's off to the left, so it's not an ideal situation. I can't pick the weather. Anyway, I'm compensating for that by putting this ND grad in there and just using it to, on a bit of an angle, to filter out some of that light coming in from the top left. Now, grads work well with long exposures because you can't really, or not easily, bracket your images. I have tried bracketing this one, but it's just not as much fun with long exposures where I will just want that one perfect shot. So I've got the grad in there. So that's the composition set, that's the lighting set, the exposure set. So what I then do is get a test exposure. Now, in this case, have a correct exposure of about f16 and 1/100th of a second. I'm doing f16 because I know that's going to extend my exposure time a bit once I drop in the 10-stop filter. The reason I'm using a 10-stop is because it's very bright still, which will give me an exposure time of around 6 seconds. That will smooth out the water, but leave the detail in the clouds there. I then want to focus, so make sure I'm in autofocus. I just do that usually, and then focus on that water tower. Then lock off that focus. That's a really important point of the workflow, to lock that focus off, because once we drop that filter in, a lot of cameras will not be able to focus anymore. So it's time to pop the filter on. I have these Polar Pro filters, as we've discussed, and then slide that in behind the ND grad. That then goes dark on the back of the screen, and I'm just going to roll that shutter speed down to 6, maybe 8 seconds, and give that a go. What I would normally do is think about covering the back of the camera, the viewfinder, because if you do a long exposure with a DSLR, some light can creep in there. So that's another important point of the workflow. And the point of developing this workflow is that it's going to be the same. You're going to do the same thing over and over and over again. So the technical side of what you're doing with your long exposures becomes second nature. I've got to turn away from that bright sun. The technical aspects become second nature. So then all you're left to think about is the composition and the artwork and the story that you're trying to tell. I'm going to shoot that once more, and just for added measure, I'm just going to cover the lens from the sun so there's no flare in the image. There we go. Yeah, so it's a very, very straightforward shot. I might have to crop a little bit because I'm starting to get a reflection of the sun off the water, which I don't want in the image, but there's some interesting tones in there. It's not the most complex composition, but it will work well at telling the story of this industrial coastline. The tide's quite far in, so I've got it surrounded by that nice, smooth water. And given the conditions, given the fact that I'm shooting almost into the sun there, I'm actually really pleased with that. And I think if I didn't have that developed workflow, that practiced workflow, I would have probably made a mistake with this shot. And that is the absolute key to getting these long exposure photographs right and making them look special. Right, I'm out of the car. It is very windy, but it's very gusty. So I think sort of normal wind speed's about 20 miles an hour, which is not too bad. But when those 60-mile-an-hour gusts come, it just sort of disturbs everything. Whew, it's a very strange atmosphere, which I think is why the conditions could be really interesting. You can see here though that the tide is right in at the moment, so there's just no point in going down to the beach just yet. It is on its way out in the next couple of hours, so I'm hopeful I'll be able to get down there. So first, I think I'm going to go and check out some of the cliffs and see what the conditions look like there. The light is beautiful. Really beautiful. You can probably see it on the lighthouse behind me there, but it's a really nice quality low light, creating a lot of atmosphere with this weather. So yeah, let's get down towards the cliff edge, the sort of stuff my mum hates me doing, and see what we can find. Right, I'm set up and this is the view, and the wind is insane. It's a very dodgy spot that I'm on, but I think it's going to be worth it. Just look at that, the light is just sensational. The gusts are making it difficult. I'm scared things are going to blow away, so even though I've got the tripod legs set out wide, I'm keeping hold of it. That sun's come back, look at that now. Quick shot. I am it's difficult to explain what's happening, but I've got the 6-stop filter on. The sea is so rough that I need to remove some of the detail in there because it's distracting from the image for me. We've then got the line of the cliffs there, which I just think look brilliant. And then that warm light. Let's take another one. Whoa! That warm light is just phenomenal. I'm trying to keep the sun out of the frame, trying to hold on to everything and not get blown away. It is exciting. The water is brilliant, but I need to remove some of that contrast from there. That's what I wanted to say. So I'm doing that with a long exposure. And then just using the cliffs to lead me in. There's some beautiful colour in the sky, some oranges, some yellows. It's just so warm and atmospheric. And then all that action and all that movement in the sea is going to add a real dynamism, I think, to the image, a sense of power. But I'm going to smooth it out a little bit to make it feel more serene. And if I wasn't being battered and blown around so much, that's exactly the feeling I would have. So I'm kind of using the long exposure to create the artistic mood in the image that I sort of envision in my head. I think that's what I'm doing anyway. Let's have a look. Oh wow, the light is just beautiful. The way it's reflecting on the water. I might just reduce the exposure a little bit to just add a little bit more motion or a little bit more detail into the water. But it's just the light. And I've said that already, but the light is very nice. And yeah, so 6-stop filter on. I've just gone down to f11 and I'm now at a shutter speed of about a second, and I'm bracketing 2 stops either side. And then let's do another one, because this is just looking beautiful. Try and hold the tripod firm for a second. Oh, and the blue of the water is coming through on it as well. And with that sun off to the top right of the frame, creating so much mood and atmosphere. The light on the water as well, coming through the gap of the drinking dinosaur, just looks phenomenal. It's so exciting. And it's all added by the power of this wind. It just feels like a very powerful scene. And that's kind of what I want to capture. It's so difficult though, because I'm holding onto this camera. I'm trying not to let go of the tripod. It's Canon's camera. I don't want to lose it. Wild. Wild, but I think it's going to be worth it. So worth it. Saying it, but it is a sensational, stunning morning. Can't get over it. Anyway, I have come to a slightly different location, just along the shore a little bit from where I was to the small island that I have here. I've got the 24-70 on this time, and I'm just in a little bit closer just to frame the island really nicely, using a bit of the shadow that the island is casting in the water just to lead me in. I've then got, again, Blencathra just off and slightly shrouded by the island to the right hand side, and it's just, again, very straightforward, simple composition. And that's just, I knew this island was here and I wanted to capture it in some way. I haven't had much chance to any time at all to scout locations out this morning because I left it a bit last minute to get down to the lakeside here, but I still think this is going to make a nice shot, and it's going to be an interesting shot because I'm going for a long exposure, mainly because I just want that water perfectly flat. And with the 24-70, I have forgotten my 6 and 10 stop filter, and I only have a 16 stop filter. So it's going to be a very long exposure because it's still quite dim conditions here, but the sun hasn't quite risen across the landscape in front of me. It is now touching the mountains behind me, which is going to be in the image and look really good, but it's still quite dull, so it's going to be a really long exposure, possibly the longest one I've ever done. So settings, I'm at about 1/10 of a second at f8, so I think I'm going to need to knock that down to f5.6. I'll probably have to bump the ISO up to somewhere like 320 or 400, and I'm just going to check very quickly on Photopills app. Yeah, so the reference setting was f8. Let me just turn this around for you here. The reference setting was f8, 1/15 of a second. You see that? And ISO 100. So with a 16 stop filter on, that's with ISO 400 and f5.6, that's a 9-minute, 6-second exposure. That's definitely the longest one I have ever done, and that's because I'm having to do that just mainly because I have forgotten my 10 stop filter, which would have given me about 5 to 6 minutes, I think. Because I'm already shooting the image. I have put the 16 stop filter on, focused in, all the normal stuff we do with long exposure photography. I'm definitely covering the viewfinder for this one to make sure that no light creeps in during that 9-minute exposure. And then we'll see how it works out. Kind of hiding in the trees here on the shoreline. The light's tipping the top of that mountain really beautifully now. That'll look nice in the image. There's still a bit of colour, a bit more yellowy, orangey type colour in the clouds, but yeah, still gonna be an interesting image. That is now just, with perfect timing, finished exposing. Ooh. Every time I look at a long exposure for the very first time, it's just so creamy and delicious. I've got the exposure spot on. The detail of that light on the mountain, bring a bit of a gradient down as well. That is going to look fantastic. The water looks beautiful, and that reflection and the detail in that reflection is just looking great. So yes, I love it. I love it. I love doing this. Right, well, I'm in position for another shot, and as you can see, the snow has really started to go now, and I'm just much more excited. And I've got the Canon R5 set up with the 70 to 200 2.8 lens on there, and wow, what a lens. Why is my screen stopped working now? There we go. That's a bit of water on the eyepiece sensor, so it switched the screen off. But oh, what a scene this is. I've got the snow coming in from top right of the frame to bottom left, and it just looks fantastic. The trick is going to be to get the shutter speed right, to get the snow looking how I want it to look. Do I want it to be frozen in the scene? Do I want some movement in the snow? I'm not sure. So at the moment I've got it boosted to ISO 500 to give me that range with the shutter speed. I'm at f6.3, I'm going to go to f8. I'm at 1/40th of a second at the moment, so I'm going to fire that off. Have a look at that. That's too bright, so I'm going to turn that ISO down. So it's just a case of playing around with that exposure triangle, because this snow, oh my goodness, just look at it. It's so beautiful. And I want to capture it with these beautiful silver birch trees. And as it starts to gather on the heather here, it looks tremendous through the viewfinder. I've got to say, this is the best viewfinder I've ever used on a mirrorless camera. As long as you've got the exposure right, it's difficult to tell that you're even looking through an EVF. It's that good. So let's have a look at that last shot. It's full of intrigue. It's full of intrigue, but it just doesn't quite look like it does through the EVF. I think what I'm gonna have to do is just keep firing until I get the snowflakes looking right. And it's just starting to look better and better and better. Oh wow, look at it over there. I don't know what to do. Let's just spin around. Let's do this real time. This is what my videos are like sometimes. Now that is a shot. It's always in these minutes that when things are happening fast, you've got to know your gear. I've only been using this camera for a couple of weeks, but it feels really natural. It feels easy. It may be because it's Canon still, but everything's right there and all the controls are easy to handle in the field like this, in this magnificent moment. Now, the weather in the UK has been absolutely dreadful this summer. It has been raining a lot. Today, I've just thought I'm gonna face it head on, go out in the rain and try and make some interesting photography. Today there are going to be some challenges. First and foremost, I think creatively trying to make good pictures in these conditions is not all that easy. Now I do have this beach which I'm heading down to with the cliffs and the rocks and stuff in the foreground, which are going to provide some interest, but it's very flat light. It's also quite grey. I think the long exposure is going to help with that. The second big challenge is going to be technically just keeping things dry, and obviously that's not going to be totally possible. I think this camera here, which I'm talking into, which is not waterproof, is going to be the biggest challenge. I have this sign here which says no access and the path is closed, but the path is not closed. You can still quite easily walk down the cliff, so that is what I'm going to do to get down onto the beach. Whoa, that would be ironic if I fell now, wouldn't it? Now, of course, shooting in these conditions is not without its upsides as well. Most people don't like being out in these conditions. Personally, I love it, and that means that I have this whole entire beach in the middle of the summer holidays all to myself. It's also very still conditions. There's not much wind. Thirdly, is that it's the middle of the day. if you know you're not going to have sunset conditions and it's going to be overcast and grey, you can shoot at any point in the day. You don't have to wait till 9 o'clock in the evening for that golden light. So I can be efficient with the use of my time, which personally I really like. Right, so I'm set up for the first shot and I've kind of perched on this rock because the tripod is sinking into the sand. The tide is as well coming in pretty quickly, so I don't want to stand here for too long, otherwise I'm going to get isolated and have to get my feet quite wet. But I love the view this way with these moss covered rocks in the foreground, the tide coming in, the hill or the cliff in the distance there, and then some detail in the cloud, which when I darken it off and make it really moody, I think will have quite a lot of detail in there. But it's going to be smooth, it's going to be dramatic from the long exposure. Now, from a technical point of view, the rain is kind of coming over the top of the lens. So with this one, I think it's actually going to be a fairly clean image without too much water on the lens. Getting the filter on is going to be the challenge. So let me just get the filter out of the packet and whack it on as quickly as possible. A little bit of water did get on it then, I think. So we now need to adjust the exposure time. 30 seconds at, let's go up to ISO 200. I think that's looking pretty interesting. I am focusing on the rock just down here. Fire that off. And then we just need to wait 30 seconds. I need to try and find somewhere to put this because my bag's over there. I've got nowhere to put anything down because I'm kind of stood in the middle of this incoming tide. There we go. That is now ooh. If I've not said it before, the first time you expose a long exposure composition and see it on the back of the screen, even if it is covered in water, there's something really interesting about it and exciting about it. The water looks a little bit brown, so I may have to adjust the white balance on that to make it look a bit more appealing. But yeah, I'm quite pleased with that for my first shot, as I'm starting to get quite surrounded by water. So I'm getting out of here. I'll show you that image. I'll show you that image now. Right, so I'm set up on the side of this rather beautiful reservoir and I'm planning on doing a panoramic long exposure photograph. Now I've done this once before on the channel and that was on the south bank of London. Now that is a spot where you usually get turfed away when you set a tripod up, but I had the tripod fully set up, I was filming, doing all sorts, no one came and saw me, I didn't ask permission, I just did it. And I think sometimes you just need to do that. I got the shot and this is the image here. It worked out pretty well, but there were some difficulties because there were 6 minutes each. So things changed within that time, obviously. And there was a little bit of a problem stitching some of the water together and some of the clouds. But I did manage to do it in the end. I think it's a pretty effective image. And that is probably going to be the same problem I have here. Now, the cloud is nice and there's a little bit of colour in the sky and you get that lovely reflection. But I just don't think there's enough interest there. But the bank at the other side, there's a lot more detail in there. There's a lot more shape and form in there, which I really like. And that's why I am using the 70 to 200 lens to zoom in on that. It also makes the panorama a bit easier because I can use this lens mount and it spins around that point so you don't get any parallax shift. Technical stuff that doesn't really matter, but it is going to be as close as I can get it to technically perfect. I think also what I'm going to do is that the clouds, or the wind, are blowing the clouds that way across the sky. So if I start on the left with the first shot, second shot in the middle, third shot on the right, travel with the clouds, it may have an easier time of stitching it together. There's not much wind, so they're not moving very fast. It also means that I think the water is going to remain pretty constant throughout all three images. It's the light changing as well. It's going to be a challenge, and we're right at sunset now, so it may get warmer and more colour in the sky as I go. So lots of technical challenges here, which I quite enjoy. I usually do my panoramas vertical, but I'm going to do it horizontal because, well, I don't want to be stood here all day. I'm at f8 ISO 100, and I'm going to do it for, if I just turn the bulb timer on here, 1 minute and 19 seconds, which it's not going to be super long. It's not as long as the one we did earlier on. It's just going to be enough to smooth that water out and put a little bit of subtle movement in the clouds, which will help it also then stitch together, I think. Will it? I don't know. Let's find out. Right, first one, that's going to be the middle shot, so let's go there. 2-second timer, and there we go. 1 minute, 19 seconds later, I'll do the next one, and then the next one. And I won't make you wait for all that. Hopefully there'll be a little bit of colour in the sky as things change. You can see up there now, can you? Yes, there is a bit of colour around, and I want that to spread across the sky to make it an interesting and warm image. Okay, so I've arrived, and at the moment my only concern is the weather. You never know when you set off on a morning like this truly how it's going to turn out, especially in this country where it's so often cloudy. And clouds are what I've got at the moment. There is some nice colour in the sky. Got this pretty cool lighthouse behind me as well, but there's just that layer of cloud on the horizon. So I may have some colour high up in my shot, but I don't think I'm going to see the sun when it comes up above the horizon. But we'll see. I'm going to set up anyway and give it a shot. Okay, so I've hiked down to these cliffs, and already, right at the start of the day, I've got those amazing 360-degree views all the way round. There's birds singing, the sea I can hear as well, but I have had to react a little bit to the cloud situation, because like I said, there is cloud cover right on the horizon, so the shot I had planned, there's just no colour in the sky in the area where I was going to do that, which is kind of over there. What I have done though is set up with these cliffs in the background. There's some beautiful pink colour in the sky here. You probably can't see it in this shot because it's exposed to my face, but it is beautiful. I've captured a nice scene. I've got the camera set up here, the Canon 5D Mark IV, and I've got a 6-stop ND filter on the front of there. And I want to capture some movement in the water here and really smooth out all this scene here. I've bracketed it as well as 3 shots, one to expose for the foreground here, one for the mid-tones here, and then to get that sky in there as well. The maximum length of exposure here is about 30 seconds, but I think that's going to turn into a really, really nice shot right at the start of the day, so it's a really good start. I feel very positive. The cliffs around here, the sea really lend themselves to long exposure. When you smooth that water out, I'm having to hold this camera this time because I'm stood on the edge of this cliff pretty much with this beautiful woodland, the view behind, but most importantly, these very, very colourful leaves in front of me. I'm going to be photographing that in just a minute. But the second point I wanted to make today is about maintaining a connection with nature. When you look around at the news and the world in general, the world at the moment is a crazy place. In the past, our job as human beings was to stop nature from killing us. That was it. We needed to survive, we needed to live, we needed to feed ourselves. And all those things still exist, but they've kind of been made really easy for us. So now a lot of the anxiety we get is misplaced and is focused on little things rather than important things like survival. It's why I am always saying the world would be a better place if everybody climbed up a mountain and saw the sunset. Because when you're in that position, you are exposed. You are on your own. Your survival is totally down to you, especially in cold conditions. But it's also the most meaningful and beautiful moment. And it really does change your perspective and give you a positive and better feeling. And I just think that connection to nature is so important. It makes you feel so good. You come home after a day like today, and my goodness, the boost of well-being is just insane. So let's talk a little bit about the photography I'm about to do. Now, it's very windy and pretty cold today, so it's not the ideal conditions for shooting woodland because you want the leaves to be still and they're moving around in the wind, so it's challenging technically. But I think what I'm going to do is use that to my advantage and do a long exposure. When you have trees or plants moving around in your frame due to the wind, it doesn't always look that good. It looks like you've made a mistake. So I want to make sure that this image looks intentional. I want the long exposure to be very intentional and it to be very obvious in the final image that that's what I've gone for. It might almost look like a little bit like intentional camera movement, but I'm hoping the trunks will at least be fairly solid in the frame. It is all about that beautiful orange colour. So I've got the 10-stop filter in. I'm going for about a 30-second exposure because I think that'll still give me some detail. I'll probably play around with a couple of exposures, see what works best. At the moment I'm at f5.6 because I don't need front to back sharpness. I'm at ISO 400 just to get that 30 seconds, and then I have it on the bulb timing because it's actually 32 seconds I worked out. So yeah, we'll let that fire away, see how that goes, and I think that could be fairly interesting. The other thing I'm doing is making it a square crop just to have all the attention with all that colour, that big, bold, autumnal colour, which just looks fantastic. When I edit it later, it's going to remind me of this moment when I felt very connected to this little spot that at this time on a Tuesday afternoon, I have all to myself. Can you believe how remarkable, how amazing, how stunning this place is? I'm at St Abbs in Scotland, just over the border from England. It's not actually a place I've been to before. It's not somewhere that's particularly famous, is it? But my goodness, it is just a sensational place. I think I'm going to go for 2 or 3 compositions. I've already found my composition that I'm going to get for sunset back on the top. We'll talk through that in a bit, but I'm down here grabbing my first shot. So I've got the camera low on this jetty that I'm stood on here, and I've got this massive rock behind me here, sort of blocking the sun from the actual lens of the camera because I don't want any flare in the shot. I'm pretty much just going for the composition that is behind me because the light on those cliffs and the sort of sea haze is just absolutely beautiful. I think it'll make for a really straightforward but beautiful composition to start with. In the frame, I have the sea sort of right in the foreground, and I'm going for a long exposure of about 4.5 minutes. I'm hoping that the sea sort of swirls around and forms a nice bit of interest in the foreground to sort of then lead you up into those beautiful cliffs. I'm at f8 to get maximum sharpness for the image because there's nothing particularly going to be sharp in the foreground. It's just going to be that nice soft sea, and then I'm at ISO 100. But my goodness, places like this just make you, they inspire you. Just the landscape on its own is inspiring, and wow, just wow. I'm almost lost for words. Brilliant. Right, I'm now in position for another shot in front of the tree that I feel I have given a little bit of fame to over the years. I love this position, I love that tree. I've photographed it so many times in so many different conditions, and today it is looking particularly beautiful with the rocks that it sits on, that calm water, and then those hills in the distance with that cloud on them just look stunning. Now I'm going to be doing long exposure, and I'm going to do long exposure with the phone, which sounds a bit strange because how am I going to attach a filter and all that kind of stuff to it? I am a big fan of long exposure photography. I have been for a lot of years. I've done it on this channel so many times, but it can be a technical faff. You need filters, you need to calculate exposure time, you need different ND filters. Light can creep in if you don't get the seal right. It's difficult, it takes ages as well. It's difficult, but I've discovered an app when I was researching for this video that just makes it absolutely insanely easy. It's almost a little bit scary actually, and it's called Slow Shutter. Now that is the scene I have composed up. I think that looks particularly good, and I've zoomed in a little bit to about 2x, which I suppose is about 50 millimeters. Now it's really easy to do, so you just click on settings like that and you can choose whether you want a light trail or low light or a motion blur. Now I want motion blur, and I want to have that blur strength as much as possible. I'm going to set the shutter speed, you can see there, 4 seconds, 8 seconds, 15, 30. I'm going to set it to bulb because then you can just press the button and the shutter button and it will keep on going. Got it on set on a 2-second timer as well, so I'm just going to go ahead and shoot. 2-second timer goes off and then it starts shooting. Now you can still see what's happening. And as the long exposure continues to go, it starts to appear on the screen as it's shooting. So you can see exactly what it's going to look like. It works differently to a long exposure that you might do if you had a filter in where it just exposes a single frame. What this is doing is taking a series of images and then combining them together by sort of blurring the movement that occurs. It's a trick that you can do with your DSLR. It's good for getting rid of people if you want to, out of your scenes, but this just does it all automatically, and it'll keep on going until I press the stop button. And I can see that already. The clouds are starting to blur. The water has smoothed out beautifully. What's really working in my favor for this image as well is there's barely any wind, so there is no movement in the leaves on that tree, and that's going to be fantastic. The tones are beautiful. They look a little bit grey, so when I edit this, I'm going to shift the white balance to the blue side a little bit, just to give it a bit more of the mood that I'm feeling right now. But that's been going the whole time we've been talking, so I don't know quite how long it is. It didn't say how long it is, but I can see the movement all coming in. You can see how the water's moving as well. Or no, it's smoothing out, isn't it? So all that contrast being removed, you can start to see some of the reflections of the hilltops and the clouds now in the water. And it's just, do you know what? To be honest, I'm absolutely blown away. I will have lost a little bit of resolution because I zoomed in. I think that just looks fantastic. And seeing it come to life in front of you as you're shooting it is very creative. And yeah, like I say, I'm a little bit blown away. The other thing, so once I press, I think that looks really nice now. So once I press stop, it sort of stores the image in the app. You can then go to edit, click edit, and if you click on, you can see all the saturation, contrast, brightness, freeze there. Now if you click freeze, you can then adjust this slider and get either no long exposure effect at all there by having it on that one, or slide it the other way and then it goes back to none that way, which is I guess the last shot it took. Or you can blend them all together if you have it in the middle, and there's your long exposure. And you can adjust how much of that effect you want, and that is just a powerful creative tool. And I'm not quite sure if it's cheating or not, but it doesn't really feel like it. So I'm absolutely thrilled with this image here, and as you can see, I think it's come out as a fine looking print. It does, however, suffer from my experience of phone prints before, where there is a slight lack of detail that kind of manifests as a bit of smudginess, as you can see here. But overall, I still think it's a very impressive looking image. I know I'm going to get some kind of shot here that I'm going to be happy with, because I think you always can at the coast. It doesn't have to be complicated. And this image that I'm about to take is so far away from being complicated, it's unreal. It embodies simplicity completely. There's some cloud on the horizon at the moment that's picking up the last of that warm light that's coming from behind us there. And some of that's reflecting off the surface of the water as well. Letting the waves come in and then roll out, and I'm using a long exposure. So I've got the 6-stop filter in the front there, along with a gradient filter. I've started carrying the gradient filters with me more recently, and I'm quite enjoying using them. And for this, a gradient is perfect because you want to darken the sky off and a little bit of the water that's very bright as well, and then that eases off as we get closer to the camera. So those clouds are looking stunning. There's also some very interesting light starting to come from over there, so I might get some pinks once the sun has dipped down behind the horizon. But I mean, just look at this. It just feels so good. So let's fire off this image at f8, 2.5 seconds exposure, because I want to get some of the detail of the water in there, but it's still going to be beautifully smooth. The clouds are still going to be nice and sharp because it's further away. And it's ISO 200 just to bring that shutter speed down a little bit, and that's it. Let's take a little look at that. Ooh, that is just beautiful. It's the colour that kind of gets you. It's the beautiful contrast between that pale blue that I love so much, and then the yellow and warmth and colour in the sky. Very smooth, very ethereal. I absolutely love that. It's so simple though. It's a fantastic thing, Durdle Door. Really impressive. The beach is really steep, so the waves are actually quite severe and quite loud, as well as you can probably hear. For the shot, I have the circular polarizer and a 6-stop filter. Now what the 6-stop filter is letting me do is just to smooth that water out a little bit. It's giving me an exposure time of about 13 seconds, which is great because there isn't really any wind today. So in that 13 seconds, I'm hardly going to see any movement in the clouds. So the clouds are going to be nice and sort of sharp because they're quite interesting. There's nice detail in there, but I'm going to get a nice smooth bit of water. For the composition, what I'm doing is using the curvature of the shoreline, basically, to where the water is coming in, foaming up. I want that to be the leading line into my image that takes you round towards Durdle Door. Now, in order to do that, that's where the long exposure also helps, but I've got to get the timing right because I essentially want the wave or the foam to come out the bottom corner of the image. So I need to wait for that shoreline to froth a bit more, a bigger wave to come in, and then get the timing right. And so far I haven't done that. The sun is now pushing through, a little bit more light, which is nice as well. The colour of the water is just fantastic, absolutely beautiful. I initially planned for this to be a black and white shot, but with the colour of that water, I'm now not sure. And the detail in the sky as well is really nice. There's a lot of blue tones in that sky. There's a good wave coming in now. 2-second timer. Just wait for 15 seconds, but it's absolutely beautiful here. Look at those cliffs behind me as well, just absolutely fantastic. Let's have a look at that, and that's just beautiful. It's an absolutely classic scene. If you've not seen this photograph before, then I'm not quite sure where you've been, but Turtle Door, fantastic, and I'm glad I've now got an image of it. So, one last thing to do when you are lacking in inspiration is to print your work. I've been talking about it with a few fellow photographers over the last few days, but printing is just so special. And when you get that piece of work produced in your hands, and we're thinking about the print when we're here in the field, it's just a fantastic thing when that final piece of work comes to life. You get to hold it, you get to look at it, and it's just about you and that the link between the visualization that you had at the start and that final print. What we do with all this stuff in the middle, I've said before, doesn't really matter. How you do it doesn't really matter. But yeah, so we're going to go back and do that. We're going to go back to the studio, and then we'll produce that final print. I'm be interested to see if I think black and white or colour is best. So I will see you after a 5.5 hour drive back up north. So I will save you from that boring moment. And this is the final print. I'm just absolutely thrilled with that. I love the tones as well. I decided to do it on matte paper, which gives you that nice sort of cotton rag feel to the paper. There's less reflections. And because of the sort of pastel colours that are in this picture, it just works really well, and I'm really happy with that. It's a classic shot. I'm now happy that I've got that, and it was just an overall great experience. I found that inspiration again, and I'm so happy I put in that little bit of extra effort. Right, we're into the location where I'm going to get the final shot of the day, and it is going to be these two mountains behind me with some of that water in the foreground. I'm going to have to explore a little bit around these rocks to find a nice composition. The coastline doesn't really make getting foreground interest that easy, so I'm going to have a little scout around and try and find it. I'm hoping as well that hill fog will lift. The weather's kind of been improving as the day's gone on, and it really could turn into a beautiful shot. I'd like to be able to see the top of those mountains in the shot though as well, because I think it just really, it'll show you the true drama of this place in that shot. So fingers crossed a little bit, because the weather hasn't been perfect today, and I would like to end the day with a nice colour image. Right, I've found a nice little composition. I've got the camera set up, and I'm going to be using the rocks behind my head as a bit of lead-in. I've had to step over some pretty slippery rocks to get where I am at the moment. A little bit of risk, but not too bad. And I'm happy with what I've got now. The camera is exposing at the moment a 4-minute and 16-second exposure, and you can see how the evening's brightening up into a very pleasant evening. The wind's died down a little bit as well, and the light is becoming better and better all the time, so I hope that will continue. You can see some of the colour reflected in the water there. I'm hoping to pick that up in my image as well, so it should turn into a pretty good one. Right, so I'm here in the Lake District. I've got to give credit to Carl, actually, who I'm with, has found this small tree or branch or whatever it is sticking out of the water, and the water level is just so high today. We've had to wade through quite a lot of water to get to where we are. One of the things that I'm currently thinking about is we've just got these fantastic conditions at the moment. We're at Derwentwater in the Lake District. We've got those mountains in the distance, and we're just getting different weather patterns coming across in the scene in front of us. Then we've got this lovely warm light behind us, which is sending a bit of its light onto the little tree there. And it's just stunning conditions. It's that sort of time that I'm always talking about, where we have that moment when the weather changes. But today it's changing almost every couple of minutes. And that's producing a few problems that I'm having to cope with at the moment as I'm trying to get a long exposure. Now, one of the challenges with long exposure is you want to decide which elements of the scene in front of you you want to which bits you want to capture the movement in. Now, at the moment, the clouds are really, really interesting. So I don't particularly want to capture any of the movement in there or take any of those beautiful details and sharp edges out of that cloud. That's also true of the tree there in the water. The only thing I really want to show the movement in and take some of the detail out of is the water. As much as these ripples are quite interesting, I want to smooth those out, because with the ripples, it captures that shadow a little bit and you lose the branch a bit with the water behind it in the ripples. By smoothing that water out, it creates some nice separation for that tree to be seen in the image, really. It's a very simplistic image. There's just the tree in the foreground, surrounded by the water, and then the rain and the cloud and everything else behind, all illuminated by some of this fantastic light as the wind is gusting around as well. So I hope that's not too distracting. The way I'm handling that at the moment is I have a 6-stop filter on the front of the camera. That's giving me the smoothness. I could use a 2-stop or a 1-stop, but I don't have those filters with me, so I'm just using what the tools I've got available. Now, one thing I tried was cranking it up to f22 using ISO 50, which gave me about a 1-second exposure. So that gave me the first image, and it just smoothed the water out a little bit. It kept the clouds sharp. I'm just going to shoot again right now, but not. And there was a lull in the wind as well. So everything was sharp, but the water wasn't quite as smooth as I'd wanted. So what I've now tried is, with the 6-stop filter on, cranking the ISO to 640, putting it down to f11, that's now giving me a 2-second exposure, which I think, yeah, that's working much better. But with 2 seconds, because the clouds are so far off in the distance, they're still sharp. I've waited for a nice lull in the wind as well, so the tree's not moving, so that's going to be sharp as well. I'm focusing on the tree. Camera's not firing. It's looking good again. Just changing all the time. So exciting. It's just a case, when you get into this position, once you're composed, you just keep on firing. Now, for the composition, I've just got the tree down in the left-hand side of the frame, just nicely, roughly on the rule of thirds intersection. That then goes up into that beautiful scenic view, which I've shot many times before. And yeah, just a fairly straightforward image once I've figured out those technical aspects, which I feel like I've done now. That water just looks lovely at 2 seconds, just enough so you can still see a little bit of the detail, but enough to isolate that tree. Now we've got a change in the light again. So with that blue sky there, you can now see a lot of that blue light reflected in the water as well. So I'm going to shoot again just to see if that looks any different in the final image. Same composition, just slight change in the light, and that's looking quite good as well. Let's have a look. Yeah, slightly different. There's shadows on the water surface. Getting a nice reflection of that tree as well. That just looks beautiful. Again, right on that sort of rule of thirds to the left-hand side. So yeah, it's just a case of shooting a few things, a variety of images with the same composition in this light, and then I'll pick which one I like back in the dry. But turning into a fantastic evening. Look at some of this light up here. Absolutely beautiful. Right, let's head back and we'll post-process that and see what we can do or which one we're going to choose to really make the best of this scene. So I'm all set up for my last shot of the day, and I've had to have a bit of a mad dash down to the next town or village from Whitby down to Sands End because the tide, as you can see, has come right in and there was no beach left at Whitby. So I had to rush down. So I'm worried about the sea catching my feet here. I had to rush down to Sands End because I wanted to finish the day with a seascape. What long exposure is absolutely perfect for though is that time after sunset, which we're just getting into now, and that's normally the time that the colour fills the sky if you've got a good sunset, and using long exposure to capture that is great because what it does is as that colour develops and as the colour moves at different spots through the sky, if you're exposing all the time that that's happening, the image will capture all of that colour. So actually you capture a little bit more colour than you would normally capture with just a very quick exposure image. And that's exactly what I'm doing here. So for my composition, I'm using these, I don't know what they're called, I do know the name, but I've forgotten, these poles leading into the sea, and then I've got the sea washing up just over this wall here, which I'm stood on. The tide is coming in, so I'm probably going to get wet feet very shortly. That's my composition from the bottom right-hand corner up into the image, and then just smoothing out that sea with a nice long exposure, and then capturing as much colour in the sky as I can. At the moment, I have a 6-stop filter on there, because as it gets to the end of the day and the light comes down, a 6-stop filter is good for just extending that exposure to around a minute to 2 minutes, depending on the light. Sunset wise tonight, are we going to get any colour? I don't really know, because at the other side of me, there's the wall here for the road. But at the other side of that, where the sun is actually setting behind you, there is a massive bank of horizon cloud. So there's not going to be any massive colour, but I do have some very high altitude cloud here, which could still catch some colour, maybe 20 minutes after the sunset has happened. So I'm going to wait around for that and try and capture that in this long exposure. I might experiment with different things. You can experiment with different lengths of exposure to get different effects in the water. If you want some swirling, do it for a bit shorter, a few seconds even, and you can really experiment using your long exposures and use it creatively. And it's another technique just to get the creative juices flowing, and that's exactly what I use it for. So now that we're done, I hope you enjoyed that video. Let's just give a quick recap. You're gonna need tripod, camera that does long exposures or has a bulb mode. You're gonna need your shutter release cable, tape over the front, and you're gonna need some neutral density on the front of your camera to give those long exposures. Okay, you can experiment with your compositions and really go to town and get out, visit those landscapes and produce some beautiful shots. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that. Please like the video, that really helps me out. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the YouTube channel, do whatever you need to do to get all the First Man photography content as soon as it comes out. I'm Adam, this is First Man Photography, out.